Hello, well-being warriors. It is Lisa Zabaniak from Life Like You Mean It. I hope that you do not mind me calling you well-being warriors. I have dubbed that recently for those of you who follow my work, watch my streams, are interested in well-being in any way, shape, or form, because that's what I'm all about, is using well-being to help the personal and professional development of you. So I thought that was really cute and better than calling you Facebookers. So bear with me. So today we are going to be talking about perfectionism, and more importantly, talking about how we can try to work on changing our ways if we are one of those people that suffers from this need of being perfect. So first, I'd like to explain a little bit about that. Anybody who is a perfectionist or calls himself a perfectionist knows exactly what I am talking about. You don't need this explained to you in any way, shape, or form. However, I'm sure that a lot of people, as we're going along, could say, I relate with that a little bit. I never would have called myself a perfectionist before. However, perfectionism doesn't mean that every single thing that you do ever has to be perfect. Sometimes we can kind of compartmentalize our perfectionist traits, and we can be, for example, an area of our lives, like say at work. Maybe we really need this particular job that we are doing, spending all of our time on. We find a need to make sure that it is absolutely perfect. And then we go home to our home life where we have screaming kids running around and realize that there is no way of being perfect there. And so we can drop that mentality at home. And sometimes it ends up getting even worse at work because we have no way of being perfect at home. Or vice versa, of course. Some people are able to run with the chaos of work, and then they have a need of being perfect in different ways at home. So this can stem from absolutely anything. For example, I know a few people that, even folding their laundry has to be a very perfect and distinct way of getting that done. Whereas other people, it's a little bit more time consuming. It's more, again, along the lines of anything that they do work-wise, or anything that's going to be put out there for other people to see, has to be 100% perfect before they actually will launch or hand that project in, whatever it is. And you can see there that that then ends up becoming the problem, because they spend so much time trying to perfect it. And the problem with that is that perfection doesn't exist, right? There's always going to be something that you could do to make something better. And part of that is because we're always growing as individuals. And so if we're growing, and then we're learning, and if we're learning and growing, then if we were going to do the same thing again, we would do it differently, which means the first time around couldn't have been perfect. Right. So if you look at it that way, you really could end up in this vicious cycle where you are constantly always feeling that you are not good enough. And that's basically at the heart of somebody who is being a perfectionist. Is one of two things, really, in my experience, is that they're having an issue with control, or perhaps a lack of control, or they are having a fear of failure. Now, for myself, I learned how to become a perfectionist. So this is near and dear to my heart because of the abuse that I went through as a child. So in particular, I needed to learn how things needed to be done in my household correctly for my stepfather, so that I could avoid being beaten. And so I learned very quickly at a very early age the ways that he liked to do things. And that really limited my ability to be able to see that the same thing could be done in lots of different ways. And there wasn't really necessarily a perfect way to do it, because the life that I was living in that moment was, there was a perfect way to do it. And if I didn't do it that way, I was going to pay a very hefty price. So I grew up, I continued to have that kind of thought well after he was out of my life. I had this kind of thought that things had to be done in a very certain way. And if they weren't done in that way, there were going to be strict consequences. And even being self-employed, those consequences could be a lack of clients, or the clients that I have walking away. from me. In my personal life, it could be the same thing. Not having friendships or valid relationships, or those people in my life walking away because I wasn't good enough. I wasn't perfect. And so this was the driving force for me in my perfectionism. Notwithstanding. So other people might have been driven by very different things, but at the root of it, almost every single person I've ever talked to that have these kind of similar tendencies have been the same two things: control and or a fear of failure. So I still, even though I'm sitting here talking to you today about perfectionism and the downside of it, I still suffer from this every day. In fact, today I nearly had a perfectionist moment in that this whole weekend I had loss of power at my house. And in fact, my power could go out at any minute now. And all I kept thinking about yesterday is, oh my God, I am going to have to do my lease alive from the car. How unprofessional is that? I'm picturing it that I'm going to have this car in the background. I'm supposed to have this professional persona, and trying to show that, I've got this successful life, and I'm going to be in my car. It's going to be blackout at the time. I'm going to have to run my car so that it's warm because it's so cold outside. And all of a sudden I thought, what are you doing? This is exactly what you are going to be doing your talk on, is perfectionism. And here you are thinking that because it wasn't going to be the exact way that you initially planned it, it's not going to be perfect. And I had to laugh at myself and redesign my plan. So I actually, up until about an hour ago, I figured, well, fine, I'll just do it out in the car. No big deal. Maybe I'll go to a coffee shop. It really doesn't matter. If there is going to be somebody that's going to watch my video on social media and think that I am not professional because I can't do this in my home, well, then they're not the right person to be watching anyway. And that's really what it all comes down to, is looking at your past experiences and looking all the times that you weren't able to be perfect. Did it really matter? Did you lose those people in your life that you were afraid of losing? Did you have a really dire consequence? And some of you might actually be saying, oh, actually I did, Lisa. I didn't get that promotion because I wasn't able to put together my presentation perfectly enough, or something along those lines. So of course, there's always going to be some times where there is something that's really big at stake. But then I've got to ask the question, was that promotion right for you then? If we fail, it brings up this whole idea of, if we fail, is there really such a thing as failure? Or is this more of a redirection? I've talked about this a lot because I really believe in this. I believe we can make mistakes. Mistakes are things that we are going to learn from, and we're going to try to not make that same mistake again next time. But failure is different. This idea that we have not succeeded at something just because it didn't go according to plan, I don't believe in that. I believe that, yes, we can be absolutely disappointed by it not going the way that we had originally planned or hoped or dreamed of. I can even say that, yes, it not going according to plan maybe on the surface had some consequences to it. But on the flip side, I have never had something not go to plan that at some point later, I haven't been able to sit back and say, if it wasn't for that not going to plan, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that includes right now, in this very minute, sitting in front of this monitor talking to you. Because I used to be a massage therapist in Canada, that I wholly and truly loved my job, but I felt like I was missing something. I felt like I needed to go to university. And so I did. And as soon as I got there, I realized that I needed to have an end goal. I couldn't just work full time and go to university with no real plan. It was too hard. So I decided I was going to become a teacher. When I graduated, the government had changed their plan so that it was going to take me a minimum of 3 to 4 years to get a full-time job as a teacher. I was 39. So I decided I was going to put out my CV, my resume, out to anywhere else in the world that would have me. And England would have me. Now, I'd never been to England before. I didn't know anybody here, but I picked up and I moved to England. I didn't even really talk to my family about it and get their opinion. I didn't really talk to my friends about it and get their opinion, because I knew that I was going to be okay. I had always been okay before. If I was making a mistake and I was making the wrong decision, I would always have the opportunity to rewrite that and go back to Canada and go back to being a massage therapist, or maybe get a teaching job in Canada, whatever. There were always going to be options for me. So that took a lot of the pressure off, right? And it gave new meaning to what I termed as success. And so the pressure is really what I'm talking about here, because we live in a world of obvious social media, right? We live in a world of instant feedback. We live in a world also where we can put something like this out and months later somebody could give feedback on it, right? And that feedback is not always going to be positive. There are some people in the world that, you know, freedom of speech is excellent and they like to give their 2 cents, but sometimes there are the occasional person out there who really does want to hurt somebody else. But I have to sit back and say, I can't plan everything that I'm doing on that one person that might give me negative feedback. Right? For example, I'm sitting here in front of you today not wearing any makeup. Oh my God! I've planned a talk on the internet and I'm not wearing makeup. Well, you know what? It's Sunday here in England. It's been a cold day. I've had a weekend without power. I have been reading a book, and when my power came back on today, I scrambled online to get as much stuff on my business done as I could. I took time out of my day to plan this talk. I did things like that that really didn't require makeup. So as I was spending the last couple of minutes getting ready to actually do this talk, I thought, you know, the perfectionist in me would go and slap on a face full of makeup so that I would look really good, in hopes that nobody's going to judge the fact that I've not taken time to put makeup on. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. The pressure to always be perfect, the pressure to always do the absolute best, the pressure to look the best, the pressure to always say the right thing at the right time to the right people, right? We live in an age of scrutiny, right? It is impossible to get away from it, which makes it even more fuel for people like me that have this perfectionist tendency. So what I would like to say is, if you've got a fear of failure, I bet you would struggle to find something that you have failed at in the past that you have not been okay afterwards. I would even venture to say that if you really looked at where you are now, took a real long, hard look at where you are now, this time, and all the steps that you had to take to get to this space, I would almost guarantee just about everybody will turn around and say, you know what, if it hadn't been for that so-called failure, I wouldn't have made those other choices that landed me here today. So in the grand scheme of it, that failure was just a misdirection, or a redirection rather. And it opened up opportunities that you otherwise maybe would not have had. And so when you look at it that way, the pressure of failing something is removed, right? It almost feels like it's impossible to fail. And on terms of control, yeah, you know, control is a very difficult thing. People struggle to gain control, especially the more they feel that they're out of control. And that's normal. And what I'm talking about here is not trying to change our normal kind of instinct or our normal type of feeling that comes up in our day-to-day lives. It's about realizing that you don't have control over the things that are happening around you. You don't have control over other people. You can't control what they say. You can't control what they do. You can't control if they judge you. And you cannot control what their reaction to you is going to be. You can control one thing in this world, and that's your reaction, right? So if you control your reaction, and I'm not talking about not letting yourself feel something, not letting yourself feel disappointment, or not letting yourself feel, upset or happy, or any of the other, common emotions. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what you do once you feel them. Are you going to let yourself slip back in to this perfectionist zone where somebody says, oh my God, look at you. You didn't even bother to put makeup on. And so then the next thing you do is make sure that every time you're ever seen on social media, you're wearing makeup. No, that is not me. I'm not going to do that personally. But in other sense, right? I mean, nobody at work expects anybody to be perfect. In a way, that is perfection, is in not being perfect, being able to see that there is beauty in making mistakes. There is beauty in learning and growing from the mistakes that we have made so that we do a better job later. That, to me, is perfection. So what I always think is really important is delving much deeper to look at why it is that we have become perfectionists in the first place. So I shared mine about my childhood and the need that it was a real physical and palpable need for me to get it right. I had to get everything in that I was asked to do, whether it was chores, whether it was making coffee, whether it was having a barrette in my hair, didn't matter. Whatever I needed to do had to be absolutely perfect, or else I had a dire consequence, right? Everybody else will have completely different things that is driving them. But the point is, we do everything that we do because we get something from it, right? We get, a lot of us with perfectionist traits, we get a high from doing something really well, right? We get a real sense of joy and accomplishment and pride and a feeling of worthiness when somebody acknowledges something that we have done really well. But it doesn't have to be perfect for you to get that. And that's, again, the control thing, right? You don't have to be perfect for somebody to acknowledge the effort that you are putting into something. It is, in its own way, perfection. Right? For you to be able to acknowledge and see that other people are seeing the hard work that you're putting into and getting the same thing out of that as you think that you are trying to get out of being a perfectionist. Because again, being a perfectionist is not attainable. So if it's not attainable, how often are you going to get those feelings of joy and elation and worthiness if there's really not that many opportunities for you to truly and totally be perfect? However, if you can shift your thinking, shift your reaction to things, and start realizing that it's in the intention of giving your best, of doing the best that you can in that given moment. Because again, every moment you are learning more. You are growing more as a person. As a human being on this planet, you are learning and growing with every single moment. And because of that, you couldn't possibly have done the work that you did previously perfectly for this moment, right? You're never going to reach perfection. So rather, let's shift your thinking and try to get something that is serving you better. So get the same thing, but doing it in a different way. So instead of this unattainable goal of perfection over here, where you are spending so much of your time away from your family, away from your friends, so much extra time at work, say, on this assignment, you are really stressing yourself out, you're causing yourself a lack of sleep, you're completely unhealthy, you don't have time to go to the gym, all of these things that you're giving up in order to reach this goal of perfection for this one task that you've got over here, and then getting the elation afterwards when somebody recognizes that you've done a really good job. Is it possible to make different choices that are going to serve you better, that will still give you the same sense of empowerment, the same pleasure, the same joy, the same sense of fulfillment and worthiness, but rather than needing it from coming from being perfect, it coming from you knowing that your intention was pure, that you did the best job that you could in that particular moment. So this is what I do. This is what Life Like You Mean It is all about, is about trying to find the things that propel us forward, that the choices that we are making so that we are reacting and acting to things in a more positive way, so that we can see all of the positive traits, so that we can develop our personal and our professional lives in a way that will let us have the life that we actually deserve, instead of sitting off in the sidelines stewing about what we don't have, or about how we're never going to be good enough, or about how we should have, could have, and would have done this, and instead making better choices for ourselves that serve us and our higher purpose better. If you are interested in anything that I have said today and want some more information, I have included a link in the bio here. Thank you so much. I hope that that helps. Bless.